Well, hello, and welcome to Bourbon Forage Fishing. I hope you're doing well. Today we're going to talk about the bourbon market and more exactly, the bourbon boom and bust cycle that we are now going through. Mainstream media is actually finally slightly beginning to pick up on the fact that the bourbon whiskey markets are in decline. And you can start saying over here on the left, you'll see some of these articles I'm going to highlight here. Kentucky whiskey faces declining sales. Bullet down 7% this year. Andrew Report sales, 24% drop in sales this year. Right? Kentucky's whiskey industry is in crisis. Whiskey sales are declining for the first time in decades. Okay, so this is all recent stuff. No one wants to talk about the oversupply of Scotch and bourbon. April 29th, 2025. Will the whiskey slump end soon? Depends on who you ask. No, by the way. Okay. So even YouTubers have begun to talk about it. They'll be it much too late. If you check out this YouTuber right here, this is a guy called Bourbon Forage Fishing. That's my channel. You'll see that I've been talking about this all the way back in March of last year, 2024, and I was actually talking about it privately with my friends, a good year prior to that, 6 months, year prior to that, to the point where I changed my my strictly fishing channel to a bourbon review and bourbon market, whiskey market sort of watch channel, and it obviously, I mean, these are big views for me. Let's see. These are good views for me. I don't know if you can see them. My head might be in the way, but these bottom videos here got, over 3,000 views each, which is great for a small channel. Again, this is back in March, folks. Bourbon secondary market is collapsing, right? Is the U.S. bourbon market, whiskey market in collapse? Again, this is over a year ago. This is a year and a half ago, folks. I reported Drizzly shutting down. Why bourbon drinkers are excited about the whiskey market crash collapse, right? April 11th, 2024. I was talking about how the whiskey market was going to collapse way back then. We reported on bourbon barrel prices falling then. The bourbon secondary markets continue collapse. The whiskey market's general collapse. A couple of videos here. How the bourbon distilleries can thrive during the whiskey market collapse, right? So I've been really with NGP scaling back. I've been really on top of this stuff. Future of the bourbon markets. I've been also talking about behold the bourbon golden age, right? So how this big whiskey boom and now bust is going to create a golden age for whiskey drinkers, consumers. We're moving into a very consumer dominant market, so it's a very exciting time to be a whiskey drinker. If you're a whiskey producer, not so much. Not so much. And I've talked about the collapse of the secondary market and why actually secondary markets are good and efficient and help markets. I reported Woodinville layoffs with much other layoffs. Now, I'm also going to be ahead of the curve on this. U.S. distilleries are facing crisis as bourbon boom ends, right? We are going to go through a distillery crisis. And I think I said at the end of 2025 we'd start beginning to seeing the beginnings of it, or maybe mid 2026. So we're creeping up on that timeline where I think we're going to see distillery closures. I think we're going to see, and I kid you not, 1,000 distillery closures, as we are over, I think, 3,500 or 3,400 distilleries in the United States. We are way oversaturated. I think ultimately we're going to see that number one-third of that by, let's say, by 2030, let's say, when we enter the 2030s. So that being said, back to my original point, the mainstream media is even picking up on this now. So when the mainstream media reports something, you know that it's like already set in stone, done, over with. This is, it's ready to go. So the mainstream media, of course, a year and a half, 2 years behind on this, but they're finally covering it. So if the mainstream media is covering it and noticing that something is going amiss, then boy, are we in big trouble. This is from the BBC. How Kentucky bourbon went from boom to bust. Although the whiskey, which is traditionally made with corn, aged in charred oak barrels, has its roots going all the way back to the 18th century, it wasn't until 1964 that it became an iconic piece of Americana when Congress passed a law declaring it a distinctive product of the United States. But drinking trends come and go. By the end of the 20th century, bourbon was considered a bit old-fashioned, pun intended. You often see these kinds of generational shifts where people don't drink what their parents drank. Then we had the recession of 2008. Drinkers seemed to rediscover this classic spirit for a few different reasons. For starters, price was good. Then in 2013, a law was passed in Kentucky that made it easier for companies to purchase and resell vintage bottles, opening up a high-end collectible market. Add to that the rise in mid-century nostalgia, fueled by shows like Mad Men, and bourbon was due for a full-blown renaissance. I don't know what Mad Men is. I've never heard of that. Sales grew 7% worldwide between 2011 and 2020. Everyone was going crazy over the bourbon market and treating it like a commodity, like a stock. People would go in as a prospector, flip bottles for 2 or 3 times the value. But like most market bubbles, this one was bound to burst, and the pandemic lockdowns tanked bar sales, and inflation was made many would-be bourbon drinkers choose less expensive options or forego drinking altogether. Among Gen Z, many 20-somethings are drinking less than their older siblings and parents did at their age. Those factors have contributed to declining alcohol sales, with bourbon sales specifically slowing down to just 2% between 2021 to 2024. And of course, we're talking Donald Trump's global tariffs, which have not helped the bourbon industry at all. So these economic pressures have created a growing list of casualties, right? So the liquor giant Diageo reported that sales of Bulleit, the Kentucky distillery that makes bourbon brand whiskey, went down 7.3 last year, guys. Bulleit down 7.3. Wild Turkey, which makes great products, mind you, great products, down 8.1% over the last 6 months. While being international brands will likely be able to weather the storm, the sales hit has led a growing list of casualties, okay, including LMD Holdings. Just a month ago, Lucia Marino Distillery in Danville, Kentucky declares Chapter 11 bankruptcy, right? We also have covered Westward, did Chapter 11 bankruptcy a few months ago. We also covered this one, Girard County Distillery went up for receivership, right? And also covered on the show, Jack Daniel's parent company closed and a barrel making plant in Kentucky. So yes, as stated, even the mainstream media can't hide this anymore. Even the mainstream media has to admit that the bourbon boom has ended and we are going into a bust cycle. Now, as I've reported on this channel many times, I don't think this is really necessarily a bad thing. As a matter of fact, for consumers, I think this is a good thing. I think this is going to be creating a situation where we're going to have an excess of product, an excess of created bourbon sitting and aging, which is going to mean older and older bourbons for us whiskey drinkers. I think we are going to see a golden age of whiskey and bourbon with all the innovation, all the new products, and now a declining sales base and a massive amount of overproduction. We're going to see older and older juice, better and better juice for more and more, I suspect, more and more reasonable prices as distilleries fight for market share. So keep watching Bourbon Forage Fishing. If you haven't watched this channel, watch it. It's a very important channel if you want to be up to date on what's happening in the bourbon whiskey industry. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel, Bourbon Forage Fishing. Thank you very much.